All right, welcome to Halitics. So glad to be with you today and also to be joined by my good friend Luke Jones. You can see he is the executive director of Maryland Normal. So Luke, welcome to the program and tell us about Weed Wars.
Oh, Hal, it's great to see you. It's great to be a guest on your show. You and I have collaborated politically, off and on for quite a while, not just here in Montgomery County, but it's great to see you spreading your wings on this platform. And I wish you the best of luck with this conversation. I hope to come back as a guest in the future, to talk about some other political issues, and that would be great. And I really appreciate you inviting us to talk about this topic tonight, today on your show. And this
No, I'm so happy to have you. And you said us because originally this had been planned with comic Liz Croydon. You actually see her in the description right now. I'm going to play around with that. And we got a late start because there was a little bit of confusion, mostly on my end, for which I really apologize. Luke, the nice thing about the internet is it's not a big deal. I mean, the video will be up there. People can see it whenever they see it, whenever they want to. But I was really glad. Yes, we worked together. We had a conference, I think you invited me to be part of, which was really generous of you. A little over a year ago, I think, in Gaithersburg, maybe less. That was a very successful one. Is pot the answer? I talk about so many problems in our world. I know you're a real ambassador for the wacky tobacco. How can it solve some of our problems?
Well, just to introduce myself, a little bit here is that I live here in Montgomery County, and I'm a government bureaucrat. I actually have a full-time job. But so this is just as a citizen, civic activist kind of a part of my life that I happened to get involved with back in about 2016 at the tail end of the Bernie Sanders campaign, which had reawakened a certain part of my political activism. And I thought I was going to be an observer of the reforms in marijuana law policy. I was shopping around for an issue that I thought would help me learn and navigate the Maryland political system as I was trying to understand the Maryland political system more intimately, and to really understand how a broadly agreed upon policy change could be achieved, because it is sort of like working out the muscles for more complex, challenging societal problems to solve, right? So I was looking for a low-hanging fruit issue as a way to see, here's how we modify public policy. And I've been, a proponent for ending the drug war from a crime and justice reform perspective and lens throughout my entire life. And so I thought that, with legalization already having arrived for adult use cannabis from Alaska, Washington, Oregon, and California, with Prop 64 passing in 2016, that was the entire West Coast was open to, anyone with an ID to walk in and, purchase legally a regulated product, which really never should have been a crime in the first place, right? So I wound up, getting involved in this reform effort as a way to try and activate citizen, to help reactivate the democracy, to help the arteries of our government and our policy infrastructure respond to what was clearly, majority opinions regarding crime and how we shift away from law and punishment and courts and this type of harmful public policy and shift towards harm reduction policies. And so that's how I got involved, you know. And what we learned was that the Maryland General Assembly in Annapolis really was not responsive to the majority priorities. They were responsive to those who were paying for full-time representation. So we found some, you know, politicians, for example, Senator Brian Feldman, a very powerful member of the Maryland General Assembly Senate, a very influential politician from an extraordinarily affluent part of the world, a very affluent part of the United States, and a very affluent part of Maryland. And he, for example, Brian Feldman, has absolutely no risk of not winning re-election, right? No one is really running against Brian Feldman. There's no credible threat to his incumbency. Yet he receives a disgusting amount of campaign donations from the industry groups that he's regulating, right? So among those groups were the cannabis companies that had a Maryland state protected monopoly, an exclusive access to consumers of cannabis through the state license system. And so those license holders had this state reinforced monopoly within the market.
So let me just interrupt you for a second, Luke, because this is really fascinating. And, you know, I was thinking the laws in Maryland still are really, you know, they're far too restrictive, right? It's still really hard to get marijuana. You have to have a license, and this, you have to get something from a doctor and all that. And really, you should just be able to buy it like any, you know, alcohol. I think it's less dangerous than alcohol. It's not addictive like cigarettes. It's not addictive like alcohol is, and it doesn't make you violent. So it should, it seems to me, be a drug that, yes, it's a drug, and there should be some regulations, but we make it really, really tough, even after legalizing it. And the fight to get it or to decriminalize it, and that fight was far, far, far too difficult. Again, entrenched wealthy interests didn't want it to be legal. So they stymied a very important reform that, you know, would have made our country a better place. It sounds like what you're saying now is even with the decriminalization, the regulation, what have you, it's been done in a way that, you know, empowers the powerful, enriches the wealthy, and kind of leaves everyone else fighting for a few scraps. Is that fair?
Well, that is absolutely correct. You know, there are beneficial aspects of funneling some of the tax revenue towards, you know, community, empowerment and betterment. There's going to be tangible, you know, positive outcomes from the resources that are harvested through sales, you know, tax, and how the social equity fund allocates those resources. But the buildup here is for this documentary film that we made, and the documentary film that we made takes direct aim at the state's policy of only issuing a limited number of licenses.
Because so let's get to that promo. I've got the slide back up there, and just struggling a little bit, folks. Please bear with us, especially bear with me. I know you're always forgiving of my various little challenges here, but this is worth checking out for sure. Weed Wars, and there was a public screening already earlier this week. I'm going to ask you to talk about that in a minute, Luke, but let's get to this promo if we can.
In the heart of Maryland, the Free State, A battle rages in the cannabis industry, a battle for freedom, for fairness, and for the future. Welcome to a world of contrasts, where the promise of a budding industry collides head-on with a shadowy, relentless, monopolistic force.
Behind me today, you will see many people that are here in support of our industry. Please look at them. These are the men and women whose livelihoods this bill as written will destroy.
Recreational marijuana means big business and big money for states that have their framework set up. As Maryland prepares for that to become reality on July 1st, these hemp business owners tell me they feel cut out of this entire process.
I'm devastated.
The only way to make this change is to make a louder voice and being loud enough to shake up these politicians.
We have a civil war going on between the hemp industry and the cannabis industry. This civil war is not beneficial to public interest whatsoever.
They failed at every turn to discredit us and took zero opportunities to argue anything factual in their defense.
Because they know if these real street people know how to get involved, they will lose.
And I'm very surprised that the state that I talk about so lovingly, buy a house, you can get equity and all these things, and my state says to me, we don't appreciate your contribution. We're going to give that to someone else. Thank you. Get the hell out.
We're trying to free the plant, and we're trying to make sure that we take the handcuffs off the plant. To me, it actually seems like it's working in reverse.
This is a very unique opportunity in American history to say that cannabinoids, THCs, we're now in a free and open market. We should do everything we can to protect that free market.
They see an industry where they know there's a lot of money involved, and they want to step into the shoes of the cartel. If I compete with them, they'll lock me up in jail.
You should find yourselves disgusted by any measure, whether you're thinking about it from a public safety, a public interest, a social justice. It is obviously corrupt. It is obviously corrupt.
You have the power to either help them or destroy them. And when you destroy someone's livelihood, that is akin to killing them. That's why we're dressed in black, because we're here to attend a funeral.
If it was really about public safety and they actually cared about the small business community, they would have passed that damn bill, but they didn't.
Who do you think kept people interested in cannabis while the state was busy locking people up for it? It was us.
Weed wars, Maryland's monopoly, and the fight for free markets.
All right, so Luke, just the thumbnail sketch is in Maryland. There's just a limited number, a very small number of big companies that are licensed to distribute marijuana. Is that correct?
Basically, there are a limited number of licenses. Not every license holder is a big multi-state corporation. So I don't want to paint every single license holder in one kind of characterization like that. But let me flip your summation just a little bit, Hal, by saying in Maryland, having a limited number of licenses favors consolidation at the expense of personal liberty.
Is there some legitimate reason to limit licensure? Because I don't really see it. I mean, what's the art? I don't get that. Like, for example, and let me sort of, and by the way, a couple of things I just want to set. So, of course, you're watching Halitics. You can see the logo. I'll actually take your call, 240-242-5646. Please, if you have something for Luke on legalizing marijuana, please do call in. We'd love to talk to you about it. The Maryland experience, if you're from out of state, or what we're doing here in Maryland, what Luke especially is doing. Also, I want to let folks know I center the experiences of the Palestinian people, and we will talk about Palestinians a little later in the show, but because we had Luke for a special moment, and he really wants to focus on this issue, and rightly so, we're sticking with marijuana. By the way, Liz, if you're watching, listening, and you want to call in, we'd love to have you on. I think we can get you into the conversation. Liz, if you're checking us out now online, 240-242-5646. So, yeah. So, like, when I was thinking about bourbon, right, whiskey, like pot's not my drug. I just have to say this. I am totally fine if other people want to get high. I'm like, good, go for it. But for me, I, for whatever reason, prefer alcohol, and I'm not like drunk all the time, but like when I want to relax, that for me is a little more relaxing. So I kind of know that maybe a little better. So there's so many different bourbons. You want to, I don't know how hard it is in the state of Kentucky or in bourbon producing, whiskey producing states to do it, But it seems like there's a lot of competition. You go into a liquor store, there's a lot. Now, maybe they're all owned by the same 5 companies, right? I guess it's true. Heaven Hill, Jim Beam, whatever. There's not that many. But still, I think pretty much anyone can operate. Maybe I'm wrong. Why do we need limited licenses, a limited number for marijuana growers?
So that is the heart of the question. The argument in favor of limiting, right? This is basically what's your question. What are the arguments that would support a policy of limiting the market access? Well, the arguments go like this. Number one, the more people that you have engaged in the sector, the more of a corresponding regulatory infrastructure is necessary to assure proper compliance with the activities. All right. So if you have plumbers, you need to be able to make sure the plumbers are certified and they're not people running around the state offering plumbing services and they're not really plumbers, and then you get into lawsuits because they didn't do a good job and these types of problems. So whatever the issue is, including cannabis production and distribution, there needs to be a corresponding investment from the state for some type of regulatory infrastructure to support the activity, right? So if you have fewer actors involved, the argument goes, you need a less of a regulatory apparatus to assure compliance from seed to sale.
That's the argument, right? Because I can already see a lot of holes in it.
I'm giving you the package of reasonings that go into this policy. One has to do with the technicality of regulation and the simplicity of regulating fewer actors that are vertically integrated than a cacophony of anyone who meets the qualifications to get a license has one. So that's regulatory compliance, complexity, and cost is an issue. The second thing is, what are the costs of an unregulated, right? If your capacity to oversee the activity is outmatched by the amount of activity, what's the cost? Right? The argument is that the cost is high because you risk diversion of this product out of the reach of a regulatory grasp. It could get to children. The products could be unsafe.
Adulterated. It's, doesn't meet standards.
Right. You're going to have undeclared income practices happening. People will say it's one thing when it's really another, and then people will get into conflicts about the purchases. And therefore, the state argues that when we shift from prohibition into legalization, we don't want to go through a bell curve of settling the market down to a number of stable providers. We don't want to go through that. We want to jump the bell curve, go right to what a mature market we expect would have in terms of financially viable business operators. Just set the number of licenses, cap them legislatively at the proper level for production, cut that whole bell curve of market expansion, settling, people going out of business, consolidating to the right level over time as a natural market force would lead us to what the right number of producers needs to be.
So I have some more question about this, because to me, you made a great analogy with the plumbers, right? I mean, there's tons of plumbers out there.
Right.
And it doesn't seem like it's a problem. They know what they're doing. I mean, I've never had a problem with plumbers who aren't qualified, but even if we had like 3 giant plumbing outfits in Maryland, I don't trust a plumbing company, a giant plumbing corporation, to do a better job, in terms of curating who's working for them. You have problem. Big companies do all sorts of terrible things and a lot of times the Toyota service technicians aren't nearly as good. They do a worse job. They're more likely to screw you and rip you off than, Joe down the street. And I'm not being facetious, because Joe was my Toyota mechanic down the street, and I never had any problem with Joe down the street. Yeah. So again, I don't, or actually it was Mike, but I picked Joe out of the air, but it was Mike, not Joe. So I just want to be fair to Mike, because shout out to you, Mike. So again, this seems like a BS argument. Let me give you one other counterfactual, Luke. I know in France, for example, in Europe, when they have lots of small farmers, like small dairy farmers, cheese makers, the food is good. It's all, it's made on these small farms. They're mostly organic because the farmers can't afford, and there's no real benefit to just fertilizing 10, 15, 20 acres. It's only when you have these enormous 1,000-acre, giant agronomies that it matters. So lots of small is beautiful, right? So again, these arguments to me fall flat as a pancake.
Well, they do to the most rational people, and we should have interviewed you for the documentary, because these are the issues that we exactly were.
No, you did a great job. You don't need me in any documentaries, but yeah, go ahead, please.
Anyway, you can see what a easy win this is. But here's the thing: is that Hal, that I really want to stress is that, unlike the scenario with the plumbers, in the case of cannabis, they have deadly use of force. They will deprive people of their liberty, separate people from their families and their communities, and drag them off to prison, or worse. As we know, a certain percentage of, unfortunately, interactions between the police and people engaged in unlawful behavior risk losing their life, not just their liberty. So it's a what the judge in our case, because this led to a successful lawsuit win against the state, as we're challenging the legality of the license, of the limited licensure scheme here in the state. We found ourselves compelled to make this documentary film.
So let me, and I'm going to cut you off again. I'm sorry to do that, but I just want to, because these questions rise in my head and I want to forget them. You say we made the documentary. So what was your role? Are you a listed producer, writer? How did you put this together, or how were you part of a team? And I think I showed a picture. Let me see if I can get that image, which thank you. Shout out again to Liz for sharing this picture. But tell us about your team there, Luke.
Well, I am so fortunate to have met my friend Nicholas Patrick there in the center, the bearded gentleman in the yellow shirt and the baseball cap. Nicholas is the director and the producer of this documentary film. Nicholas and his wife and family are standing with him there. His wife right in front, and other members of his family. And we had a tremendous premiere in Baltimore for this film. We had over 150 attendees. We had 4 members of the Maryland House of the General Assembly, House of Delegates came. We had staff and management from the Maryland Cannabis Commission and the Office of Social Equity in the House, and a number of individuals who, significant number of individuals who are completely boxed out from participating in what is otherwise a legal sector of the Maryland economy, from small family farm owners who are aspiring producers and would like to do so legally under a state issued license, and others who would like to add cannabis infused products to their baked goods, for example, and to be able to provide that to adult customers who may want to purchase such a product from their family owned and operated existing confectionaries.
Can I ask, what's the law on that? And by the way, let me say, based on experience, you got to be really careful with those baked goods, man. I mean, they'll just take, I mean, they knock you out, baby. You don't feel it, right? You eat those brownies or cookies, and then like,
I would say, Hal, that
half hour later, man, you got hit.
Well, Hal, I think that this is another example of why a legal market is so important, because no one is excited about unanticipated effects. And, knowing, what effects are likely to come from a properly labeled and dosed product, you can really avoid, types of experiences that turn into,
100%, 100%, Luke. The experience that I'm referring to was, me, right? Sure. I mean, I prepared based on a recipe, and it was not a great experience for me or my family. And again, if there had been
ironically, those are experiences that a lot of people use to justify the continued need for prohibition at the individual level, because they say, oh, people won't know what they're getting into. It would be dangerous for people to have a sense of safety, and therefore we need to maintain a ban, on individuals. And so it's a really interesting way people keep coming around to how to keep police officers involved in administering the production and distribution of this particular commodity. Now, what I wanted to just return to and then sort of wrap this up to your questions, because we're not going to cover all of the cannabis laws issues today. The thing is that in January of 2025, the Maryland General Assembly will reconvene. And so we are in the midst of preparing for what we are going to try and achieve, legislatively. And we're working with legislators now on that. And this documentary film is part of our legislative and policy reform campaign. It's a organizing tool. It's not just a interesting story. And we are addressing the legality issues, and it culminates. It's only an hour long. It's not exhaustive, but the culmination, is an ongoing story about a lawsuit that we have so far been successful at challenging the state's monopoly. Now, I just want everybody to know that while adults in Maryland have access, to the cannabis plant through these state licensed enterprises, that is a consumer access question. But a market access and participation question is still hotly being debated. And it's currently leading to severe negative police citizen encounters in order to have a state reinforced monopoly. And how the thing that I want your audience to understand is that the state government paired with the interests of a monopoly is fascism. And so it's a microcosm of how Annapolis operates to reinforce anti-democratic, economic, and fundamentally unjust, economic systems. And that's why, Hal, I started my segment with you talking about Senator Brian Feldman, and why it is somebody like Brian Feldman would need to harvest tens of thousands of dollars every election cycle from the very industry groups that he himself is purporting to regulate and oversee and administer. And it's not just Brian Feldman. I know I used his name about 40 times in your show, but I'm just using that as a lens into the whole body.
Well, I mean, the whole system is so corrupt, right? I mean, Maryland is just one of 50 where there's this kind of insider dealing and a huge, massive conflicts of interest that politicians exploit to remain in office, to maintain power, to line their pockets, to get a golden parachute if they leave. I mean, this is just American government. And, when people start telling me, oh, the Democrats are so much better, I'm like, Maryland's is a one-party state. It's all Democratic controlled, and the corruption is up, is up the wazoo here. So this is just our system. Do you have, I mean, I know your focus is more narrow than mine in terms of, your work at Normal and its national organization to reform marijuana laws, but do you have like a broader solution to how we break free of this paradigm, Luke?
Well, we need to take a hard look at capitalism as an organizing as a way to manage our political economy, and whether or not it's sustainable. I don't think that it is, and I don't think profit should be the pursuit, of our endeavors. And so that would be my, concise answer, but I think the rest of it is how do we deal with the consequences of capitalism? And I think that talking about how we deal with the consequences of capitalism without talking about uprooting and replacing capitalism with a new political economy that is, different,
leads to fairer, juster outcomes, because the ones we have now are just, I think they're unacceptable. Luke, one of the questions I asked to go into this program was, can cannabis be the cure? Little alliteration there, cannabis cure. Mm-hmm. We are a society that's hurting. We're a society, I said we're in a dark place, I believe, based on our support for what, the Israeli genocide in Gaza, based on recent news reports that Biden's contemplating green lighting the use of American weaponry by Ukraine to target Russia, which could, explode this endless war that we've already been fomenting. Is it, as somebody who, I don't think it's a secret, somebody yourself who uses marijuana, again, I drink. I mean, is this something we should be doing? Is like smoking to burn up our troubles away, or at least to somehow come up with a better way to, I don't know what, to live with them? Because it seems, and I know maybe this sounds like a weird question. It's not what normal hosts do, but I just feel like we're in a really bad spot. And I know a lot of like football players, pot is, the pain, right? It hurts. Football really, really hurts. And a lot of guys, they deal with that by smoking pot. I think that sounds right. If it works, do it. Is this a way for us to deal with the pain, the emotional pain of our world?
Well, I hope not. I hope that, it's an interesting question that you're asking. I think that, I like to encourage the goal more to be about, love and connection, and generally, the practices that are associated with that type of development are prayer and meditation, and mindfulness, and so I think the pursuit of balance and health, mental, physical, and spiritual, are part of being a mature adult, and how we incorporate that into our practice, so that we can be contributing positively, to our family and to the world. So, people find their path, for a lot of us, it's sobriety. And for a lot of us, it's sobriety. And for some people, they find relaxation through exercise, or through, massage, or through a balanced diet.
Well, you hope also, just to jump in, connections with other people, with your family, with loved ones, with friends. But I feel like...
Well, let me just get back to the cannabis stuff. The thing is that cannabis has been part of the culture for thousands and thousands of years. It's not like, oh, now we're maybe discover cannabis for it. No, I think a lot of people have found, access to cannabis, and some people, puts them to sleep, and it makes them paranoid, and they don't like it, and other people, it has an effect that they find to be palliative in some way. And for some people, it takes people out, and it's not good. And so there's no panacea. We're all different. And we need to learn to love and accept one another, and to make sure that we reach out to people, that may be struggling with connection, and spend time in nature and do things like that, so we can look at plastic and say, what libertarian policy is going to solve plastic pollution? None of it. It has to be some type of sit down, no, you can't do that, and to bring the corporations to heel. Otherwise, all the ocean will fill with plastic, and we'll be sitting here saying, well, maybe one day we'll learn to do it differently. I
think, Luke, when you talk about the political economy and our rapacious capitalist model, really capitalism with fangs, it's an enemy of love. It pits us against each other. We're in competition 24/7 to get rich, to have enough to survive. And we're competing with other people for scarce resources rather than making a collective conscious decision that there's enough, but there's only enough if we share it and we make sure that we all have enough. And at the same time, no one has too much.
Well, so anyway, you can see how just starting to talk about the cannabis issue leads to these fundamental questions, right? We've talked about questions of liberty. We've talked about fascism. We've talked about the proper use of police. We've talked about the political corruption of the Maryland General Assembly. We've talked about the corrupting influence of money, and we've talked about capitalism, and that's one of the things I love about this policy issue. When we start to engage in the conversation. There's a lot of people who are passionate about cannabis. There's a lot of people who are passionate about liberty. There's a lot of people who are passionate about rational public policy and safety. And we work very closely. I work very closely with a group called the Chesapeake Region Safety Council. The Chesapeake Region Safety Council helps educate on impairment detection, and that's one of the areas of work of this important nonprofit organization, and they provide certification across a whole range of sectors pertaining to safety, in safety standards across operations, across a whole range of things, and including training of police officers in how to conduct roadside sobriety tests and to detect impairment. And also for employers to distinguish between, I smelled cannabis versus you're exhibiting signs of impairment. And those are two radically different things, right? Because saying, oh, wait a minute, did you smoke cannabis yesterday? You're fired. That would be inappropriate. But to say, you're performing the task, in an unsafe manner, or the performance, or the, there are legitimate ways to identify impairment, and impairment is not the same thing, as consumption. So we can get into those issues and talk about those issues as well. Once we start,
we can do that. We're going to move. I'm going to move on in a moment, yes, Luke, and I'm going to let you go about your business. I do want to move to a second topic, but before I do, I have two questions. And the first is going to be, I know you said that Weed Wars, and we've got that. This is a clip from YouTube, so you can find it there. And there's an old show called Weed Wars, so I got a little confused from about 10, 12 years ago, but this is not the television. It was kind of a documentary. This is a little different. That was a documentary about the Oakland growers out there in I forget the name of that, Oaksterdam. So here's my question for you, Luke. If people want to see Weed Wars, can they? How can they?
I am very happy to announce that we are going to have our second screening of the documentary film in Baltimore on June 27th, Thursday, June 27th, at a venue called The Garage. I don't have the address, but that's okay. It's easy enough to find. After June, Weed Wars, Maryland's monopoly and the fight for free markets will be available on YouTube the last weekend of June. So June 29th, I believe we will make it available for the public to view. We're going to get a lot of clicks on it, hopefully, when we drop it on YouTube. And in the meantime, members of the press can get an advanced screen, a link to an advanced online screening. And we will definitely invite your viewers and your email list to come to the premiere the next screening in Baltimore on the 27th. All right.
All right, well, we'll absolutely promote it. Looking forward to it, Luke. Great to see you. And, I want to just give you like a huge amount of props because you've been pushing for sane marijuana laws, sane regulation for, as long as I've known you, and I'm sure long before that. And you've made so much progress and really made a difference, right? And I think that's what we all want. Most of us, I think, really want to make things a little bit better. And you've done that. So thank you. And also, congratulations, right? I mean, good job.
Well, I wish I could take more, I wish I could take some credit for having moved the needle but it's just one drop in an ocean of voices and one part of a whole community. And I happened to grab the mic and get on the camera and play that kind of role. But there are so many people, including legislators, that have really sacrificed some of their personal and professional reputations behind this issue over the years. So when just to sum, when the organization, the National Organization for the Reform of Marijuana Laws, was founded, that public sentiment was about 12% in favor of legalization. There was an overwhelming consensus, that this was a very, very dangerous thing. And so it has been a long uphill battle. Our next installment, this is part 2. Part 3 of Weed Wars is going to focus on the incarcerated population, because for my state, the state chapter of Maryland Normal, our primary legislative goal is to repeal the mandatory minimum sentencing provisions in the Maryland law. Maryland still has today on the books mandatory minimum sentencing for volume dealers and drug kingpins. And this is a legacy of the drug war that is a shame. It's a shame to every Maryland citizen. And we have to repeal What happens when we repeal the mandatory minimums? Everyone convicted where those parts of the law were cited will then have cause to have their cases reheard, and we get into resentencing and hopefully release of people who are still incarcerated because of mandatory minimum charges that were handed down during Prohibition. So we still have a lot of work, legislative reform work to do. It's not a Cheech and Chong.
This was my second question. If people want to help you, right? If they want to be part of this, how can they?
Yeah, well, just go into any social media platform and look for Maryland Normal. We're on Facebook, Instagram. We even have an X account, which I think I check maybe once a month. But
yeah, that social media is it's a time suck for sure. I mean, I know when I was in various progressive groups, just checking on, monitoring these various, and now there's more and more. There's Instagram, there's X, there's Facebook, there's it's just so many. It's really, I can't do them all myself. I don't do them all, but it's really difficult.
But those are the ones, and we would love to hear from people. We do not send out an excessive number of emails, but what we do have, Hal, which is an advertisement for people to join our email list, is click here to send your legislators a message on this particular reform. So if the issues we talked about today are of interest to your viewers, they should definitely contact us. And
Luke, thanks so much again, man. You take care. Don't be a stranger. We'll get you back. We'll get you back again soon. Luke Jones, the executive director. That means big shot. That means top dog, head honcho, numero uno. There he is. You're laughing because you're like, yeah, it's true. That's awesome, Luke. You take care. Great to see you. We're going to let him go. We'll have Luke back again soon, I promise. Always great to see my good friend Luke Jones. 240-242-5646. I do want to move on, just as I always say, I always want to center the Palestinian people, because and people I've heard, well, what about, there's lots of other problems in the world, Al. It's not just Palestine. It's not just the victims there. And by the way, they're not all victims. Remember, some of them were responsible for October 7. I hear that stuff all the time. And look, of course, there's other places in the world that are terrible. There are really tragedies are going on. Darfur, right? Sudan is one of the most dangerous. It continues to be one of the most dangerous places. Ukraine. I talk about Palestine so much for a couple of reasons. One, it probably is the worst right now, the highest death count. And two, because we're complicit. We're guilty too. We're responsible to a degree that we're not as, look, U.S. imperialism is a force for evil around the world. I used to talk about Haiti all the time because we are so complicit in what was done to Haiti. And right now, the country, of course, imploding, it's a void. It's anarchy. People say, well, we don't need the police. We don't need the order. We don't need order. But if you look at Haiti, you'd say, hey, if you were in Haiti, you'd want order, right? It's not like either you have a fascistic militarized police or you have armed gangs roaming the streets. Hopefully you have neither, right? Hopefully you have a, enlightened, responsive, non-violent police force patrolling, or helping maintain order in a country where people are relatively free and we have economic justice. So it's not one or the other. It's both. It's yes and. We're responsible for what's happening in Gaza to a degree that we're just not as responsible in other places. And that's why I talk about it so much. So it's terrible. What's happening there is just awful. The Israeli military has moved into Rafah. There are tanks in the middle of that city. This is from the BBC. We'll get to the Al Jazeera report in a moment. From the BBC, the troops, the Israeli army reached the city center for the first time. The tank is at the tanks are at the Al Auda roundabout, which is the location of major banks, government institutions, businesses, and shops. Sure sounds like downtown to me. A witness reported to the BBC that they saw Israeli soldiers at the top of a building shooting at anyone moving. So that's yesterday. That's Tuesday. That's Gaza right now. That's Rafah right now, which was supposed to be the safe place. And those are our weapons. They ask what, I guess John Kirby, I don't know. I don't know which weapons are ours that are being used. I don't know. This is from Al Jazeera. We had 78 dead yesterday, 46 the day before, 45 the day before. And I don't want to just, be reporting numbers of dead people because it feels kind of sterile. But, I mean, it's just so awful. So terrible what's happening there. And again, this is our ally. It's not even that we're doing nothing to rein them in. We're aiding and abetting war crimes. We're aiding and abetting genocide. I put on social media, I was responding, somebody, I don't know, trying to justify what Israel was doing. I can't remember what. And I said, they were saying, oh, Gaza's not, I can't remember, that bad or something. So I said, well, before October 7, it was an open-air concentration camp. Now it's Auschwitz. And I was, I said that bearing in mind, thinking, well, it's just, there's no safe place. Everywhere you go in Gaza, you're very likely to be killed or see your children or your spouse or your grandparents or your grandchildren killed. It's not a completely fair or just analogy, okay? Auschwitz was a death camp where mostly Jews, but some other undesirables, Untermenschen, whatever the Nazis wanted to call them, gypsies, maybe some Slavic people who had, mental, emotional challenges, were brought to be exterminated. They were brought into a camp and they were killed. They were murdered in that camp. It's not quite that in Gaza. It is genocide. It's a different form of genocide. It seems as though, hopefully it will stop at some point. The death rates aren't at the level, at least certainly not yet. So, we don't want to overstate or exaggerate. But there are Holocaust survivors who look at what's happening and they say, this is what the Nazis did. They are dehumanizing Palestinians. They're humiliating, they're mocking them, and they're killing them. 53 people killed in the enclave and 357 injured in the latest 24-hour reporting period. So remember when Biden halted the shipment, and this was a victory. AOC talked about how great it is. Look, the president is responsive. This is the argument I hear a lot from people who say, well, you got to vote for Biden because at least he listens. We can have some impact. We can do something with him, whereas Trump won't listen to us. What the hell? I don't see any listening. This is a very instructive little video here I want to play for you. Again, if you want to join me, 240-242-5646. I popped out my chat. I'm not seeing any chat. I'm trying to monitor that as best I can. Tomorrow, by the way, is the free-for-all, and I will talk about some of the comments I've gotten, I guess all from Shade. No, not all from Shade, mostly from Shade with respect to the fossil fuels tax proposal that I laid out in detail yesterday, not for the first time, but kind of did it in a little bit of a different way. Here is a State Department flack being questioned about the Israeli military actions in Rafah.
So how does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation.
All right, so he says, how does this not violate? Because remember, the president had set this red line. Well, we can't ship you arms because we're afraid you're going to use them against civilians in Rafah. And we'll see a massive increase in the death count. That's why I'm pausing. That was the reason for the halt a few weeks ago. That was what Biden said. You know, we can't have these military operations in these civilian areas. It's just too deadly. It leads to too many fatalities of innocent people, women, children, men. Can't do it. And he paused for about a week and then he restarted them. And as far as I know, they're still going forward. So the question to John Kirby is, how does this not violate his red line? We have the, tanks are in downtown Rafah, where the banks are, and the hotel, well, there are no more hotels, and I don't know if the banks are even open. But to the extent there are any shops where people might go to get some bread or something, this is where they are, and this is where the Israeli military is, and they're taking pot shots at people from the roof of buildings. How does this not violate Joe Biden's red line? That is the question. And let me just go back and replay it for you.
How does this not violate the red line that the president laid out?
As I said, we don't want to see a major ground operation. We haven't seen that at this point.
Well, how are you not seeing it? That's what's happening right now. This was either today or yesterday. How are you not? The tanks were in downtown Rafah as of Tuesday per the BBC. It's not even Kirby, it's not even Al Jazeera, it's the BBC that's telling you that. How is this not a major ground operation?
How many more charred corpses does he have to see before the president considers a change in policy?
We don't want to see a single more innocent life.
By the way, totally fair question. Totally legitimate question. I often ask, those who say, well, what about what Israel did? Israel suffered. Israel's a victim too. It's not just the Palestinian people. Look what happened to Israel on October 7th. And I'm like, okay, that's your position. How many dead, Palestinians does Israel, how many Palestinians does Israel get to kill, right? What's the number that they get to kill, they get a pass for because of October 7th? I mean, it's absurd. Of course, you don't get to kill any innocent people. A crime was committed on October 7th, a crime that is understandable in light of the oppression that Israel has been leaving on the Palestinian people for, some would say, for 75 years, right? Persecuting them, limiting their rights, limiting their freedom of movement, killing them, stealing what land they still have. So, yes, when you oppress people, they do respond violently. And sometimes people who are innocent or largely innocent are victims, right? That's just what happens. If you want peace, then work for justice. If Israel wants peace, they have to treat Palestinian people justly, and they don't. And now they're treating them evilly. They're treating them the way Nazis treated Jews. It's just the way it is. So I get it. Kirby doesn't like that question. How many more charred corpses does he have to see before he considers a change in policy? But Kirby won't, I understand he doesn't like the question, but it's a fair question.
Taken, and I kind of take a little offense at the question. No civilian casualties is the right number of civilian casualties.
If that's the right number, then why are we still supporting Israel? The International Court of Justice has issued has indicted the leader of the Israeli military, the defense minister, Gallant. They've indicted Netanyahu on war crime charges. So that's because they're killing civilians. So I don't understand, Kirby. If the right answer is 0, why are we still helping Israel? You didn't answer that. And by the way, look, Kirby's just there to, he's just a face of the administration. Obviously, these are the questions for Joe Biden.
And this is not something that we've turned a blind eye to, nor has it been something we've ignored.
But you have turned a blind eye. But that's nonsense. Of course you're turning a blind eye to it.
Or neglected to raise with our Israeli counterparts, including, Ed, this weekend as a result of this particular strike. Now, they're investigating it, so let's let them investigate it and see what they come up with.
It's just, they're investigating it. I mean, come on, man. All right. I have to confess, at this point, and I've heard the arguments you got to vote for Biden because of the judges. And I think it's not a totally BS argument. As I said earlier this week to Triple G, when Democrats are in power, judges are better or not as bad. They nominate better judges or less bad judges, depending on who it is. Sometimes they're bad, but that's basically true. That is true. And so then you have to say, well, is that a sufficient reason to vote for a Democrat? And sometimes it is, right? I mean, maybe it's a good enough reason to vote for Angela Alsobrooks over Larry Hogan. I don't doubt it. Or I'm not arguing that. Let me say it that way. Maybe I doubt it, but I'm not going to argue it. At this point, I don't see how one can morally support Joe Biden for president. At some point, there has to be a red line for voters too. And I don't know how we haven't crossed that line. I don't know how that, there are objective standards. Everything isn't subjective. I'm not one of these people who believes there's no absolute morality. There is. And we've gone so far beyond what's okay. This administration has gone so far beyond what could be considered moral, what could be considered right, to a sinister place, a dark place, an evil place. That's where we are right now. And I don't, under those circumstances, see how one can morally, legitimately vote for Joe Biden. At some point, you have to say no. And if your argument is, well, it would be worse under Trump, it might be with respect to Israel. I get that. It's hard to believe, but maybe he would be even worse. But look what's happening in Ukraine. Biden considering, we sent billions, right? Billions of dollars of aid to Ukraine now. Over $100 billion. Just to perpetuate slaughter. Just to keep it going, the killing, rather than do our utmost to stop it. And now the administration is considering greenlighting missile launches into Russia, which could definitely lead to World War III. Not that we aren't already possibly there. We don't, this is not academic. This is not moot. This is real world horrors. The only way the Democratic Party will change, I don't think the Republican Party will change, but the only way to change the Democratic Party is not to support them, not to vote for them. They've got to lose elections. And if the argument is, well, we can't afford that because Trump's an existential threat, then my answer is, what the hell do you think Biden is? He's just as much of an existential threat as Trump. No, really. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. It will be the free-for-all. Huge mega props to my good bud, and I use the word bud advisedly, my good buddy, Luke Jones. Luke, thanks so much for joining us. And sorry we didn't get you on, Liz. I really appreciate your brokering the conversation with Luke. We'll hope to see you soon.